Now I know why Krishna had 4 arms. Okay, I have to loosen up a little bit on New Year's Eve, right? Touch ultimate emptiness. Hold steady and still. All things work together. I have watched them reverting, and have seen how they flourish and return again, each to his roots. This I say is the stillness, a retreat to one's roots, or better yet, return to the will of God, which is, I say, to constancy. The knowledge of constancy I call enlightenment. Now, there's something fascinating going on here. Something kind of curious. And John talked about it, and the musicians sang about it. Most of the world is doing a different ritual, really. Symbolically, I think it's an entirely different ritual than what we happen to be doing here. It doesn't make us better, it doesn't make us worse, but a little bit different, I think. What does the Eagles song say? Some dance to remember, some dance to forget. We're all dancing the dance of life, you know. And we're all doing some pretty basic things. We're all breathing. We're all ingesting food into our systems and digesting it and so forth. We're all talking. We're all holding our bodies in certain postures of sitting or standing or lying. But there's a slightly different motivation. Now I see some new faces out there, and the spiritual path can be talked about in many ways, but primarily I think it is a remembering. There is a movement in life as we move from unawareness to self-awareness, which initially is highly unbalanced. Here we are. There is a movement, gee, something is amiss, something's not quite complete. And the answer has to be out there. And we charge forth, and we grab onto situations. We grab onto people. The answer's in her, the answer's in him. Still not quite right. We try to dream a new dream. I know if I had a particular title, if I had that Swiss bank account, bet if I was driving a Mercedes, that would do it. And we do this, well, I'm an American, what hope is there for me? But those Tibetans, the lands of the snow, it's a part of my soul that says, boy, now those people, they're the ones with the good karma. They've got it made spiritually. In other words, we continue to think that it's out there, that there's something, some sense of completion that can be had through a new external patterning. We know that that is, as we begin to awaken into any degree of self-awareness whatsoever, we know, gee, there's something, like I say, that's a little bit incomplete here. I've got to seek it out there. Now, there's 2 approaches to that, and one is simply to try to forget, to try to blot it out, this incompleteness or this, what some people would call dukkha or suffering in Buddhist parlance. And to try to forget it through an amnesia effect is what a lot of the world does tonight. Now, Guy Lombardo seems to have found the middle path, so he moved along. But the idea of how much booze or how much cocaine or whatever it may be that, whatever ritual a lot of the world is performing tonight, it's a forgetting. It's a moving away from the pain simply by blotting it out, a narcotizing effect. And the mystical traditions of all religions say, something needs to be done, but I don't think that's the answer. And instead of trying to block it out, we try to rebalance our awareness. Instead of searching out there, we begin to backtrack. We realize, gee, if I am indeed the creative principle, if you are indeed the creative principle, the real you, the self, the Atma, the Paramatma that dwells within, if that is in fact the case, I seek to behold myself. I seek to know this reality more clearly, more abundantly, more directly. I'm tired of this secondary existence. I'm tired of this tertiary existence. Symbolically, I'm tired of looking at the girly magazine. I want a real live woman, right? It's primary. It solves the problem that a magazine can't solve. Magazine may be cheaper. We want a primary experience, a primary ritual of our existence. As I say, to behold the true self-existent one which lies within each sentient being. In order to do this, we have to, having moved out, the mystics would say, for eons, out into life and out into the universe external, trying to solve the problem, either through tremendous love or tremendous anguish or sheer exhaustion, we begin to backtrack, we begin to move back towards ourselves. It presents certain problems because we begin to, sometimes they say you can tell who's starting to really get both feet on the path because they're walking around, oh, ah, ouch. Oh. It's a little difficult because instead of trying to blot out the unawareness, the memory track, which is the definition of the soul in yogic terms, the memory track, which is our greatest possession, our greatest treasure, our greatest blessing, is a source of anguish for most people. And that's why the move towards forgetting. So the yogi, the person who seeks to know the truth of himself, the truth of herself, says, well, maybe I probably wasn't a very good guy when I was 3 years old, or when I was 3 lifetimes ago, or 300,000 lifetimes ago. I bet I did some terrible things and some wonderful things. What the heck, I guess my mind and my body are probably no better and no worse than anybody else's. There's an exercise of compassion and understanding to those around. And this allows us to apply the same understanding and compassion to our own minds and bodies. And it turns the memory track, it turns our soul from a haunting, irritating force into truly a great blessing. It allows us to see the forks in the road ahead more clearly and to know which one got us into trouble yesterday and therefore which one may perhaps solve the problem today. And it says that John pointed out, talked a lot about the difference between pleasure and happiness, pleasure and joy. And one of the Upanishads, one of the yogic scriptures out of India, exhorts us to choose the path of joy rather than the path of pleasure. I really like the feel of that particular statement because it conveys to us that the spiritual life, the life divine, is not meant to be a sackcloth and ashes trip. That we don't have to, didn't Jesus say, you need not disfigure their face to see God? That's not exact, but I think it's pretty close to the King James. And we see, gee, the path of joy, that sounds like a nice thing. I'd like to seek that. And so we start to make distinctions and we start to make choices. And maybe we find ourselves sitting in a funny place like a yoga temple on a New Year's Eve, thinking about what life's all about and trying to remember, trying to take this dance of life and use it to remember rather than to use it to forget. And so in a light way, in a friendly way, in a human being to human being way, we try to take this time, this return to the roots, because it is kind of cold and nasty outside and so forth. It's a good time to pull inside and try to remember what life is all about. To try to remember what we usually only remember during the quiet times, before the karma kicks in and all the compulsive, energized activity of whatever the external life may hold for us, before that kicks in. When you get all, pulled in a million directions, it's hard. So again, as we move on the path, we seek again and again the return to the roots, to remind ourselves what life is all about. Doorway to Meditation. Kripanananda has edited a Tibetan text, I believe it is. It's available upstairs, by the way. And if you talk about just fundamentals, things to think about on the new year, again, not as a heavy trip, but as a, boy, let's be friends enough. Let's be good enough friends to really be straightforward with each other and to really talk truth. It's a nice feeling. A few thoughts. Causes for regret. Having obtained your difficult to obtain free humanoid form, it would be a cause for regret to fritter this life away. Your human life being so brief and so uncertain, It would be a cause for regret to expend it only on worldly aims and worldly pursuits. The Holy Guru being your guide upon the path, it would be a cause for regret to be emotionally separated from him before obtaining your enlightenment. Those would be causes for regret. Things to be done. Attune yourself to a spiritual preceptor endowed with complete knowledge and spirituality. The first time I heard Kriyananda meditating with us on this particular series of verses, he repeated, attune yourself to a spiritual preceptor endowed with complete knowledge and spirituality, and he was being very solemn and meditative. Then he paused for a minute. He says, good luck finding one. Ha ha ha. I laughed real loud. I was just coming to the temple. I thought, I like that guy. Study those benefic sciences of health, astrology, and omenology. Constantly obtain alertness of consciousness in walking, sitting, eating, sleeping, playing, laughing, crying, and in dying. Okay? Now there are some things that are to be avoided, they say. Avoid a guru whose heart is set on acquiring worldly fame or worldly possessions. Avoid friends or followers who are detrimental to thy peace of mind and or thy spiritual growth. Avoid such actions as harm thy mind or impede thy spiritual development. There are also some things not to be avoided. Ideas, being the radiance of thy mind, are not to be avoided. And that's a real important one, I think, because some of the literature and some of the bad translations that are out give the idea that really we're supposed to become some type of zombies, some type of automatons. My mind is quiet and I can prove it because I haven't had a rational thought in days. And, the spiritual people that I know have intellects that are keener and more active by far than most of us. Reason, being in every action thy best friend, is not to be avoided. The thought of helping others, howsoever limited your ability, is not to be avoided. That's really a good one. Because I know that any of us who have sat in this chair that Kriyananda has asked us to give a lecture or meditation, I know from personal experience and from talking to the other folks, the first thought that goes through your mind is, my God, I have nothing to say. What do I know? But maybe there is an idea or a thought that someone in the audience hasn't heard, and maybe it will be valuable. Things you must know. You must know that all visible phenomena being created are transitory. You must know that the effects of negative past actions will produce pain and are symbolically inevitable. You must know that no existing thing has independent existence. There are some things they say that you should acquire. You should acquire practical knowledge of the path by treading it. Spiritual knowledge, having dawned within yourself, neglected not through slothfulness, but acquire the attitude of cultivating it with ceaseless vigilance. Having absolved to obtain the highest goal, abandon selfishness and ego, and acquire the habit of devoting thyself to the service of others. Things to be persevered. You should persevere in listening to and meditating upon the spiritual teachings. Persevere in meditation until thou obtainest mental tranquility, until thou obtainest the mental tranquility of samadhi. Should there be a great attachment, the great mental weakness, persevere in thy effort to eradicate it as soon as it manifests. Reflections. By reflecting upon the foolishness of the earthling's life and the rounds of successive existences, may thou be incited to seek illumination and emancipation. By reflecting upon the difficulty of eradicating erroneous concepts, may thou be incited to constant meditation. By reflecting upon the uselessness of aimlessly frittering away life, may thou be incited to diligence on the path. There are certain dangers, they say. Weakness of faith with strength of intellect leads to the error of talkativeness. That's not so good, but then you can have problems the other way also. Strength of faith with weakness of intellect leads to the error of narrow-minded dogmatism. Great zeal without adequate spiritual instruction leads to the error of going to erroneous extremes. I think this is an important one because many of us, when we come to the path spiritual, we really are sincere and we really do want to be genuine and advance along the spiritual path. And I think there needs to be a realization that although tremendous enthusiasm and intensity of mind are necessary in order to grow spiritually, the body is to be disciplined but not to be abused. The ego is to be balanced but not to be destroyed. It's considered a functional instrument in the yoga system. The earth life is to be balanced but, not to be mutilated. In fact, it's to be made more full. Unless the mind be trained in selflessness and infinite compassion, you are apt to fall into the error of seeking liberation for yourself alone. This is something, frankly, that some of my friends with strong Western religious backgrounds question me about sometimes when we talk about yoga. I'll talk about self-realization, as Yogananda called it, and they say, well, isn't that selfish? And the answer is no, we just have a poor language to describe the dynamics of enlightenment. Because there's two selves that they talk about in the spiritual world, and one is the ego self, and one is the spiritual self, the self-existent one, as Shelley and Kripanananda call it. And when they say, as John pointed out, for example, when the teachings say be yourself, they're talking about this higher self. And as you meditate, as you intern, you realize that the self is not the body. The self is not the mind. It's certainly not the gray matter, the brain. And you begin to realize, I am a part of life, not apart from life. And therefore, to heal oneself, to balance oneself, to enlighten oneself, has a whole deeper meaning than, this funny body that was born a few years ago and will die in a few years and comes and goes pretty quickly. That's not who I am, and your body is not who you are, according to the spiritual teachings. Incidentally, footnote, they talk about meditation, and they say you should acquire, as I just read, practical knowledge of the path by treading it. In other words, by meditating, by studying, by realistic, sane austerities, whereby you can experience the fact that, it's nice that the scripture says such and such. It's nice that my teacher says such and such. But boy, to experience it, now it becomes primary. Now it's no longer belief. And Yogananda always says you have to know the difference between belief and knowledge. And belief is a good starting point, but knowledge should be the ending point. Mistaken things. Attachment may be mistaken for compassion and benevolence. Cessation of the thought processes may be mistaken for quiescence of mind. A mere glimpse of reality may be mistaken for complete God realization. The grievous failures. Having been born a human being, if you give no heed to the holy doctrine, you resemble the man who returneth empty-handed from a land rich in precious gems. And this is a grievous failure. To dwell with the sage and remain in ignorance is like a soul dying of thirst on the shore of a lake. And this is a grievous failure. To preach spirituality and not to practice it is like a parrot saying a mantra. And this is, indeed, a grievous failure. The indispensables. A philosophy comprehensive enough to embrace the whole of knowledge is indispensable. A system of meditation which will produce the power to concentrate upon anything whatsoever is indispensable. A method of practicing the select teachings, which will make them more than mere words, is indispensable. Gee, it'd sure be nice to find a sage to help us in this search, wouldn't it? How would we know if we did? Well, there are signs of a sage. To have but little pride and no envy is the sign of a sage. To have but few small desires, and to be satisfied with simple things, is the sign of a sage. To be able to keep alive friendships, while you regardeth all beings with impartiality, is the sign of a sage. The grievous mistakes. For a spiritual devotee to apply himself to vain worldly sciences rather than seeking the secret teachings of the Guru is a grievous mistake. For a spiritual devotee to make far-reaching plans as though he were going to establish permanent residence on this earth is a grievous mistake. For a spiritual devotee to spend his life between worldly hopes and worldly fears instead of gaining an understanding of reality is a grievous mistake. The precious jewels. One esoteric truth is more precious than innumerable exoteric doctrines. One momentary glimpse of divine wisdom is more precious than any amount of knowledge derived from hearing, reading, or thinking. A single moment of samadhic bliss is more precious than all sensual pleasure. One lifetime spent in the quest for enlightenment is more precious than all lifetimes spent in worldly pursuits. And finally, the smallest good deed done unselfishly is more precious than innumerable good deeds done selfishly. And in closing, what I'd like to do is just a short meditative ritual, if you'd join me, if you'd care to, just to sit comfortably and in turn, close your eyes and gently focus them at the root of the nose between the eyebrows and uplift. And what I'd like you to do, because this is a time to remember, to recollect, and to rebalance. Let's remember one of the obstacles that we had in 1985. Think of a person. Think of a person who hacked you off. A person who hurt you or didn't do what he or she should have done to fulfill their responsibilities to you. Visualize the person in your mind's eye and send them the meditative feeling that we're sharing at this moment to balance their being. With all the strength of the spiritual consciousness within, send forth the anandic waves of bliss to bless their being, that their dreams may come true. That 1986 may be a year truly filled with happiness and goodness on every level of their being. And thereby free yourself. That 86 may be thus for you and for me. Now, as the Tibetan yogis say, remember your unselfish deeds of the past. Remember your noble deeds of the past. Truly remember your unselfish, noble deeds of the past. Remember one thing that you did in 1985 that was meaningful, that was noble, that helped another being. Attune to that ritual pattern. Did you feed someone? Did you share a thought? Did you share and therefore lighten a burden? Did you smile at someone who was sad and show them that you cared? Did you make love to your husband as he always dreamt that he could be made love to? Did you give someone a flower or a book? Whatever it was, and let it intensify in your awareness with the promise of that pattern of nobility, of sharing, of enriching, of enlightening will move forth and will grow and blossom in 86 a billionfold. It's good. Good vibrations. I think it'll be a good year. Namaste.